Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor at USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Wow, yeah, maybe it's kind of risky saying what I say at the beginning of every broadcast. Everyone all set, cocked, locked, here we go. Because of the massacre that occurred in Las Vegas. And, but, you know, class, when I say that, I mean it lots of different ways, all simultaneously. The Boy Scouts would say, be prepared, right? And I'm saying, make sure you're prepared for everything that may come your way. And that's really what I've meant, and I've said this in the past about being cocked and locked. And of course I am cocked and locked as well, with my 45. And the reason for that is, well, I'm a farmer, and I'm out here many times all alone, and no one's coming to help me. So I have to take care of myself. And there are gunshots here all the time. We've got poachers, and we've got people who trespass, and there are people who are interested in stealing our farm animals. And so I'm cocked and locked all the time because I don't know what's coming. I actually witnessed a guy who stopped in the middle of our dirt road, leaned out of his pickup truck, and shot a 10-point deer right on my farm, right across the fence from the road, absolutely as illegal as can be. And I went to arrest him. And I saw him do it. I was only a few feet away from him. And I went to arrest him, and he took off, and there was a truck chase that ensued. And, well, he had a gas-powered truck, and I had a diesel, and he outran me. Otherwise, I don't know what exactly would have been the outcome of that, but true story. Guineith Isaacs is with us. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
I am well. Now, it's about 9 after midnight in Australia, right?
We've just gone on to daylight savings time. So it's about 9 minutes after 1 in the morning.
Whoa, it's getting worse. Yep.
It doesn't
it's getting worse.
Way.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, you know, one of the things that we wanted to talk about today and yesterday was something called adverse possession. And adverse possession sometimes is called squatter's rights. It's a principle, it's a legal principle that applies when a person does not have the legal title to property, real property, usually land, but attempts to claim ownership, legal ownership, because of a history of possession or being on the land or occupying the land without permission of its legal owner. However, there may be no owner in sight. There may be no owner that has been seen in a long time. And it may be sometimes difficult to figure out actually who owns the land. And that's what we wanted to talk about today, right?
Yep, that's right. Yep. And I think I mentioned on a previous broadcast that we had 40 acres of land next door, and the owner, I didn't know who the owner was. I assumed that the owner had died intestate, and that means that the land had no heir, had no owner, and so I thought, oh, good, okay. And but as it turned out, the land was sold at some stage in the past. The land did have it did have an owner, And just a few days ago, the owner showed up and, began camping on the land. And I said, and started using their chainsaws, and my dogs went absolutely bananas. Because, of course, as far as they were concerned, it wasn't just my land, it was their land too. And somebody was on, in their doggy minds, somebody was on their land. Anyway, these people started using their chainsaws for cutting up wood and such like. So I went across and basically said, are you aware that you're on my land? Because I didn't know that these were the actual owners of the land. And we had a conversation, and basically they said, is this your land? I said, well, yes, unless you've got title to it. And then I realized that they actually did, and that they were able to prove that they did actually have title to it, basically through an existing knowledge of the land, that they had a history of it, and that they weren't just random people who'd shown up and started camping on the land. They didn't show a certificate of title, but at that time it was proof enough for me, and so I said, okay. Well, I just thought I would let you know that, see these fences here on the land, I put those fences in, and you can either pay me for the fences, and they says, and I said, well, I, paid for the wire to put them in. I paid for the fences, or I can take them out. And I said, okay, all right. Or I said, okay, I'll take them out then. And they said, yes, okay, yeah, all right, well, there's no hurry. And I said, all right, well, I'll take them out though. And so anyway, we had a conversation, and the thing is, because I realized that they were the legitimate title holders of the land, that I would have to back down, I did so, and because of that, I've actually got a new set of neighbours. I think I've got a new set of neighbours that I'm going to be on quite good terms with. And we're able to exchange a lot of information. And the thing about adverse possession is if the genuine title holder does show up, then you've got to back down. Okay? And if you don't, there's a number of things can happen. You can be charged with trespass, okay, for one thing, which nobody wants. The other thing is, you've got to realize that these people are going to be your neighbors. And if I was a legitimate title holder of land and came and found that people were making a unfounded claim of title to my land and wouldn't back down, then I certainly wouldn't like it. Do you know what I mean? There's a difference between if you're somebody who has the title to the land and somebody who, if there is no clear owner for the land and you are using that land, it's a different thing to if there is a clear owner to the land. If that makes sense, Vincent.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that we do here to make sure that our land stays with us rather than one of our neighbors on one of the boundaries of our property, claiming ownership over time through improvements, is that we take our dirt bikes, our four-wheelers, and we walk and we bring the dogs and we make sure that we use all of our land so that there is no question. And that's one way of doing it, because what can happen, and you talked about intestate, and that is a condition of an estate when a person dies without having made a valid will or other binding declaration. what will happen with that land if a person does die. So land, there can be claims on property that can be held up in court by exactly what you're talking about, adverse possession. And if I'm not mistaken, here's what it says. I'm going to read something from Wikipedia. It says, courts have long ruled that when an owner does not exercise their right to recover property and the statute of limitations on recovery expires, not only is the original owner prevented from exercising their rights on the property, but an entirely new title to the property springs up in the adverse possessor. In effect, the adverse possessor becomes the property's new owner in the United States. The time limit on an owner being able to recover the property varies widely between individual states, ranging from as low as 5 years to as many as 40 years. And typically what I've heard of in the studies that I've done, it's about 10 years to 20 years. That's what I've heard. What is it in Australia?
It's 10 years in Australia. Mm-hmm. And on this land, I first began adversely possessing it in 2013. So we were 4 years into the adverse possession. But that adverse possession is now null and void because the legitimate title holder has shown up. But the interesting thing is, I think that things must be getting pretty bad in the outside world because the adverse possessors, they came from interstate. They actually came all the way from Queensland, which is, oh gosh, how much? Probably about 1,500 miles from here. And that they...
Let's talk about that when we come...
Yeah.
Let's talk about that when we come back, because I think what you're saying is life wasn't so good in Queensland and they came your way, right? We'll be right back.
That's right.
We've been talking about adverse possession. And according to Wikipedia, it continues saying, although the elements of adverse possession are different in every jurisdiction, a person claiming adverse possession is usually required to prove non-permissive use of the property, that is, actual, open, and notorious, exclusive, adverse, and continuous for the statutory period. So what that means is that a person would have to use the property exclusively and be visible and continuous. Can't just set up a campfire and put up a pup tent for the night and then claim it, for a period of 10 years. So you have to continually use it. And what Guineith did was she put some fences in, and that was notorious, exclusive, adverse, continual, open, okay? And she met the qualifications.
And dams.
And put up a dam, too. For 3 years. Okay, 7 more years, and she could have claimed it as hers. So, and it wasn't like you were trying to steal the land. Let's make sure that's clear to our class. It wasn't like...
I thought that the land was intestate land. If I had known that that the land had actually been sold at some time in the past, and that there was an actual real owner out there in the universe, there's no way that I would have done what I did. I thought that the land was intestate land.
Yeah, and yeah,
no
because
chain of title.
Yeah, and what could happen had the real owner been watching you, put up a fence and build a dam? He could, a war could start over something like that. So you don't want to do that. You know who the owner is. It's if you really truly believe that that an owner died without a will, without or a document stating what would happen to that land, who it would go to, that kind of thing. And if there is no apparent owner anywhere in sight and hasn't been for a while, then, then maybe you might want to consider adverse possession. Otherwise, absolutely not. Okay. Yep. And
the other thing is that you've got to recognize if you're a prepper and you've bought some land out in the Hinterboonies somewhere, okay, and you've got a piece of paper, that's got the nice little boundaries of the piece of land drawn out on the piece of paper, and you think, oh, well, when the world goes to pot, then we'll, head up bush, and then we'll set up our little place on our little piece of land up in the bush. Well, if you, if you did that, if you bought that land, like I said, depending on your jurisdiction, 4, 5, 6 years ago, you might get there and find that there's somebody else who's put a nice fence around it, who's put a dam around it, who's been felling trees, has built a homestead, and you might find that if they did all of this 6 or 7 or 10 or 12 years ago, or however long ago, you might have lost all claim to that land.
Right.
You've got to keep an eye on what you're doing. And you've got to keep an eye on any real estate that you've purchased, even if you think it's out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, we have an instructor who's been on the air with us within the last week. Her name is Deborah Brewster. And she's a really bright gal. She's a real estate investor, and she's a developer. Okay, she manages very large projects. I'm talking in the millions of dollars. And she has a location where, it's her bug out location, if you will. It's a farm. However, she knows what we're talking about, and she makes sure that she visits that farm often, many, many, many times a year, and works on it. And, there's no question that she's the owner, to make sure that, any neighbors or any squatters understand that now this is not one that they, want to adversely possess. So those are some of the thoughts, class. And Guineith is right. Make sure that if you have a Plan B location or a bug-out location, that it's clear that you're the owner, and that you are visiting, spending time, maintaining, maybe improving, so that there is no question as to the ownership of that property. Guineith and I will be right back. We're going to talk about Queensland and what she's experienced with neighbors moving away from dense population to. Guineith Isaacs is with us. Guineith, you had mentioned that you met your new neighbors when they arrived on the 40 acres adjacent to your land, and they came from Queensland about 1,500 miles away. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the density of population that they left to come to a lower population density. What was that all about?
Okay, now if you're the part of Queensland that they came from was the Gold Coast. If you're looking at the Gold Coast, you're looking at somewhere with about the same population density as somewhere like Miami. So, yeah, we're talking about skyscrapers down to the waterline in Queensland, in southeast Queensland. And I used to live for a while not very far from the Gold Coast, but in a much less dense area, and in a place called Russell Island. And one thing that I experienced when I was there, which was the reason why I had to move from there, unfortunately, because it is a beautiful part of the world, was police corruption. And one thing that police corruption does is it leads to massive crime rates, like you would not believe. When the police stop doing their job and they actually start becoming evil, that's very, very bad news. And I don't know, what I do know is that Queensland is becoming a very, very bad place to live because of generally, high crime rate, that the law is not evenly enforced, that basically that they are beginning to have a lot of the same problems there as what we're having in a lot of different parts of the world. Some groups seem to have this marvelous Teflon coating and can do things like, carjack whoever's car they feel like. They can do things like, or just about anything. You name it and they can do it. But if you take one toenail out of line, then look out, basically. That was my experience in the end of Queensland, and that's why I had to leave there. It was very, very, very bad there in the end, and I was having things happen to me, like I had my yacht sunk in the middle of a shipping lane. I had about probably just under half an acre of land. It would have been about 1,700 square metres of land on a, basically a subtropical island with basically that had a something like a half-developed suburb built on it, if that makes sense. So I was probably about 15 minutes walk from the local little supermarket, but when I was at home, it was in the middle of a forest. I was one of the only, properties on my street that was, that was there that would ever be built. And it was really lovely, but there was, this really, really highly corrupt police force. And they quite literally were making my life a living hell. And if I had continued to stay there, they probably would have ended up killing me, I think. And I don't say that lightly, but
would you say that this corrupt police force was organized crime?
Oh yeah, absolutely, okay. Yeah. But they were absolutely organized crime. And it was because of some of the criminal activities that I found out that they were doing, because I opened my mouth about it to some friends of mine. That's the reason why I began getting given a hard time.
Would you say that that in addition to the uniformed people, the guys with gun belts and tasers and those kinds of, and batons and so forth, rifles in their trunks, known as the law enforcement, in addition to them, would you say that the judges and employees of the court were involved, and were the mayors involved as well, as maybe all the way up to the governor? Are we talking at that level, all the way up?
I didn't have any contact with the court system there, but I would say probably. Regarding the municipality, definitely. Yeah. They were definitely very, very corrupt.
So,
and like I said, certain people in the municipality just seem to have that special Teflon coating.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that?
Yeah.
So a person from the other team, like our team, would you say that there would be nobody for us to call in the event of having a problem with the law enforcement team? I mean, who would you call? Is that the case?
There'd be no one to call. Okay. No one would be on your side.
Okay. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
It's
very,
the same way in this
very
country.
Sad situation. Mm-hmm. And like I said, their background and history is none of my business next door. And I'm just happy for it to stay that way, to be perfectly honest. But what I do know from people who I know who live to this day in Queensland, who are friends of mine, is that things are getting progressively worse there, okay? And that they are having many of the same problems as are happening in Melbourne, which I think I've mentioned on the broadcast, problems such as rampant gangs that happen to hold a certain religious persuasion and that think that it's their right to go and claim anything that's yours, including your car, including maybe female members of your family, etc. And basically, that if the blue team is called, that they've been ordered to stand down, and they're not going to do anything to help you, because some people seem to have more rights in this country than others. And to be perfectly frank, it is the Muslims. They are being told that they can do what they please, basically. And you see them walking around, and you'll have one man, and he'll have 2, 3, or 4 women trailing along behind him, and they are his wives. And if it was any Aussie that went having 2, 3, and 4 wives openly, they'd be arrested. But, there's one set of rules for one group of people in this country, and there's another set of rules for another group of people in this country, and it's not okay. It's absolutely not okay. But it's happening all the time, and it's disgusting. It's got nothing to do with race. Islam is not a race, it's a religion, okay? And the only objection I have to Islam as a religion is that their religion tells them that it's okay to chop my head off, okay? Because I'm a woman, because I'm a Christian, because I have a Jewish surname, because because I'm a tarot reader, okay, which makes me a seer, which in their language makes me a blasphemer in their religion. And, if they had Sharia law here, that would give them the right to execute me on the spot, and I've got a little bit of a problem with that. I don't want to be executed. Mm-hmm. I'm just living my life. I'm peaceful. I really am peaceful. I don't go out and try to hurt anyone, but I don't want my rights to be infringed either. And that's my rights to have peaceful enjoyment of my own life.
One of the things that I'm seeing in our neck of the woods here in Missouri is there's something that's really nice that we do here. You don't see it in most places. But when there's a funeral procession, let's say we're on a 2-lane road, 1 lane coming, 1 lane going, and there's a funeral, a line of cars. They'll have their lights on, their headlights on. And what happens is, let's say that procession is coming north. The southbound lane of a 2-lane highway, everybody will pull over and stop. Now, is there a reason to stop because of traffic? No.
Manners.
What? It's out of respect.
And respecting the departed.
That's correct. Now, that's the way it was 10 years ago, 12 years ago. However, there are some new people who must have moved in and don't seem to understand that. They don't understand, and so they just keep on going, and as the cars in front of them pull over to the shoulder, I mean, they don't just stop in their lane. They pull over to the shoulder, and they leave room as if there were an emergency vehicle trying to pass them, okay? That's the way it is. But not so much anymore. We now have people who don't seem to understand that, or don't care, or are on their cell phones, whatever the reason may be. They just keep on going. And it's offensive to me, because that is part of the culture of our part of the world here in Missouri. Now, it's not part of the culture in Virginia. It's not part of the culture in other East Coast United States. But it is here. And it sure is something that we should respect and honor and even participate in. But there are fewer and fewer of us participating in that now. That's one thing. And I mentioned to you that we live on a dirt road. And when we come back after this short commercial break, I'll tell you what's happening on our dirt road, which is offensive as well. It is almost as offensive as not pulling over for a funeral procession. Guineith Isaacs is with us. We'll be right back. You know, Guineith, I've mentioned on this broadcast that our farm is on a dirt road. My family lives on a dirt road. Now, a dirt road is one step below a gravel road. Gravel road would be an upgrade to where we drive to get to our farm. And one step below a dirt road would be a trail through the woods, you know, where the trees are in the way. So we have trees in the way, but we really don't have much of a road here. And one of the things that happens when you live on a dirt road is typically the roads are not very wide. The roads are about enough width for one car to get by comfortably in one direction. And often we find that there are cars coming in opposite directions, or pickup trucks or vehicles or tractors coming toward us, or we're going toward them. And the rule has always been, it's been unwritten, but the rule is that the larger vehicle just keeps moving, and the smaller vehicle pulls off to the ditch to let the larger vehicle keep going because of momentum and things like that. Well, there's a new group of people who've moved into this area who don't seem to understand that. They drive these little puddle jumpers, and they race around, and by racing around the dirt road, it's a real problem because it causes dust. A lot of dust. I mean, clouds of dust behind the vehicles. And it's not polite. So those of us who have lived on dirt roads for years will drive slowly because we know that the guy behind us, or the guy that we might even know, there might even not be someone in sight, but soon there might be somebody coming down behind us that we don't want to leave a cloud of dust and have them choke all the way behind us for miles. So we go slowly. And we know that animals jump out from the farms on either side of the road, the ditches. We know that there are plenty of wild animals, and we don't want to run them over and kill them. So the polite thing to do is to go slowly. If you see a vehicle coming your way and it appears to be larger than your vehicle, then you pull over and you let them continue. Well, the new group of people who've moved in don't seem to understand that. And my son, who has he sees things in black and white. Not very many shades of gray in his life. And he hates it. He absolutely hates it. If he's pulling he's in a 100 horsepower tractor, weighing about, 12 to 14,000 pounds. And he's got a 4,000 or 5,000 pound baler behind him attached to the tractor, and he's pulling it. And some little puddle jumper comes flying up and runs him off the road. He hates it. He absolutely hates it. He thinks it's careless, reckless, inconsiderate, unacceptable. And so what does he do now? He does not move over. He does not move over. For these little puddle jumpers, he just keeps on going. And, if they want to risk ending up in a ditch, so be it. But he hates it. And I don't blame him. And we're seeing more and more of this carelessness, recklessness, me first, in rural America than we've ever seen before. It's people coming from the cities. We know who they are. Their haircuts are different from ours. I don't want to say racist things or racially stereotypical things, but their haircuts are different from ours. They look different from us. They slouch down in their seats. They drive almost lying down. We don't do that. We drive upright, paying attention, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong on a dirt road. They're a lot more slippery than a paved road. And so we're seeing a new group of people moving into the area that, I don't know, do we take them under our wing and counsel them and say, hey, listen, you want to live here in harmony? Here's what you're going to have to do. If you don't want to live here in harmony, if you want to have a lot of tension, just keep on doing what you're doing. But, the other thing we're seeing is they don't seem to know where trash cans are. They don't know what they are or where they are. So trash goes out the window, and we're sick of it. Let's talk about the move from dense population to the rural countryside. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Guineith Isaacs is with us. She's live in Australia. You know, Guineith, I wanted to report something that I've noticed over the years as a farmer here in Missouri, in the United States. I've noticed that it seems that the average age of farmers is getting older. And it's absolutely true. The census, which is published, for farming, which is published every 5 years during the last 30 years, the average age of farmers in the United States has gone from 50 and a half years old to 58.3. So the average age of farmers in the United States has increased in the last 30 years by 8 years. So the average U.S. farmer is 58.3 years old. That's as of information published on February of 2014. So we're getting older, and I'm older than that. So I'm older than the average farmer. I'm 65. Well, the population, you know, how many people are farmers in the United States? Well, about in 1987, about 5 million people lived on farms, which was about 2% in 1987. And it's clear that farmers are getting older. I mean, I can see it. How much money is there in farming? Well, the median annual income of farmers in 2010 was $61,000. The top 10% of earners in farming made about $107,000 a year. The bottom 10% made about $30,000 a year. So is there a lot of money in farming?
No.
No. Now, you know, you can say, wow, $107,000, that's a lot. Yeah, that's the top 10%. But when you talk about farming, that's Mr., Mrs., and family. That's like the whole family. So the whole family, if they're farmers, can, typically, the median income is $61,000 for the entire family. And there's an enormous amount of risk. It's a little different from having an automobile and driving to work. The risk there is, well, you've got to have some kind of transportation, whether it be a bus or you ride your bicycle, or whether you have an automobile to go to a job. The risk with farming typically is machinery, and the machinery can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. You know, a new farm tractor is really, really expensive. The maintenance is really, really expensive, and keeps getting more expensive. Yesterday, just as an example, yesterday I decided to change the oil in one of our tractors. It's a John Deere tractor. It was built in 1984 or 1985, and it's a model 2950. In case you want to look it up, class. It has a cab with air conditioning, and I keep it so that the air conditioning works, and it requires a lot of work keeping that air conditioning system working in the tractor. Well, I decided to change the oil. It holds about 12 quarts of oil, and I went to put an oil filter on it, and I thought, before I take the old one off, let me just make sure that I've got one. I couldn't believe it. I did not have another oil filter. Now, normally, I stock about a case of oil filters. Well, for some reason, I missed that particular model of oil filter, and I didn't have any. So I thought, well, I really don't want to do this. I really don't want to pay tax at the local Missouri auto parts place. But I just wonder how much it is. Last time I bought the oil filters, they were about $3 a piece. Well, $11 plus tax.
Wow.
And I absolutely refused to do it. So I got on the internet and I looked up some cross-references, and the oil filter is you can get a John Deere oil filter, or you can get a Fram. The Fram model is PF20A, and they're about $11. And so I found a cross-reference to an AC Delco, which is okay with me. I looked at the measurements, I looked at all the specifications, and I found them for a little over $4 a piece. So I thought I'd buy 12 of them. Well, the place that had them on the internet had 17 of them in stock, and I found a coupon for 5% off. And by the time I was done, I got the oil filters, all 17, every one they had in stock, AC Delco, for about $4.45 a piece. No tax. So I kind of like that. And that's what farmers have to do. Farmers have to, I mean, there's not a lot of money in farming. And every time we lose a cow, every time a wild animal takes out one of our calves, we lose $1,000. It's as simple as that. And it's heartbreaking. There's very little money in farming. I mean, it's a great lifestyle if you can stomach it, and if you can handle the hard work. Everything's expensive and far and heavy and breaks down a lot. And what I'm trying to relay is farmers are getting older. And as we get older, everything that used to be heavy in the first place is really heavy now. And if it was far before, it's really far now. And if it was expensive before, it's really expensive now. And that's what it's like being a farmer. And here's the point I'm trying to make. So we get a call from one of our neighbors who's a farmer, and he's about my age. And he says, "Hey, Vinny, can you do my hay for me?" We can't do it. We can't do it. Health reasons. Sure, be glad to. And how does that work? Well, typically the landowner gets half. And the guy who does the work, provides the fuel and the equipment, gets the other half. So we bale his hay, and for our effort, we get half of what we bale. And he gets half. That's fine with us. Not that we were looking for work, but he needed help, and we helped him. Fortunately for us, we were a little bit short of hay because of the drought we're experiencing, and it worked out well. And then we get another call. Another farmer, a mile down the road, he can't do his hay. He's on oxygen. He's about our age. Well, meaning my age. And so we did his hay. And then there's another farmer, he can't do his hay. So we're doing hay for 3 farms. So 3 plus hours. That's 4 farms. I don't know how much longer this can continue because it's wearing us out. But we want to help our farmer friends. We don't want them to lose their farms. So we're helping them. But as we get older, it's going to be tougher and tougher for us too. And what I'm seeing is that family farms are going away. Family farms are becoming more and more run down. Family farms are being gobbled up by developers. So we're taking really good farmland and we're turning it into driveways and suburbs. Yeah. Yep. And the number of farms in the United States is going down. The size of farms is slowly going up, and the age of farmers is increasing. So what we're looking at is more and more corporations producing our food. That's what we're looking at. And it's of concern to me. And I don't know how a guy can go to the John Deere dealership and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a baler to replace my old baler, my hay baler." It's going to be $25,000, $25,000 for a current model baler. And if he says, "What do you got in a tractor that would go with that?" That's going to be $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $80,000, $90,000. It's impossible, I believe, for a young person. Let's say a guy graduates high school and says, "You know what? My granddaddy was a farmer. My daddy's a farmer. Well, heck, I want to be a farmer too. I want to raise some cows. I think I'll do it. I'll just go to the bank and borrow some money and get that tractor, that baler, that hay mower, that hay rake. I'll build a little barn." It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible for someone to start out unless the land is given to him, and unless he's got used tractors given to him. There's no way that a young person can start out becoming a farmer with no money. Impossible. But you can. If they
do it the conventional way, that's true.
Right. Yes. Now you can start out and get a job with no money. If you've got clothes that are acceptable for that job, you don't have to have money to be an employee. But you darn well do to be a farmer. How would you recommend that someone start out as a farmer without any money? Is it possible?
Okay.
I don't think so.
If you can, Okay, I'll tell you how I first started out. Okay. My first real farm was about 10 acres of land, and that was in Geraldton. And I managed to be able to get what's called in this country a rent-to-buy mortgage. Okay. I had a family member who had a little bit of money, and she bought the farm and had 100% equity in the farm, but the title of the farm was in my name, and I rented the farm from her. So she held the mortgage over the farm, but instead of me making repayments on the mortgage, I paid rent to her. And then after a few years, the real estate prices in that part of the world went up hugely, and I sold the farm at a profit and was able to buy, at that time, a suburban house. And then after a while, I sold the suburban house and bought the farm that I'm on now.
So, Guineith, you approached, as far as I can tell, you approached the owner of this farm with a rent-to-buy mortgage possibility, and this owner was willing to give you that rent-to-buy mortgage, and you made those rent payments and ultimately were able to buy the farm. Is that right?
Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. I actually put in the offer for the farm in Geraldton, okay, not this farm that I'm on now, and I put down the deposit. I had no idea how I was going to pay for the farm at the time, and it was afterwards that the relative came in and offered to finance that farm on a rent-to-buy basis. So it was a chance that I took. But, you know, it's a thing in life. Sometimes you have to take a risk. Sometimes the risks actually do pay off. And
about what year?
Certainly, yeah, that was
about what year was that?
That was 2004 that I bought
the reason
the farm in Geraldton.
Okay. The reason I ask is it reminded me of something that I did. It's the same kind of risk. It's kind of neat. I decided that I had a boss at my job, and this guy was kind of rough on me. And I decided that I could become a real estate investor and ultimately become a little bit more financially independent of the job. And so I found this apartment building that I could buy. Well, I thought I could buy it. I certainly didn't have enough money to buy it. It was back in 1980 or so, in the 1980s. And it was about $250,000. It was a small apartment building. And I approached the owner, and I said, I'm interested in buying your building. So we talked about it, and then finally I let him know that for me to buy his building, he'd have to lend me the money. So I said, I'll buy it, but you'll have to lend me the money. And he did it. He did it. And it's kind of what you're talking about. And so I renovated the apartment building. I put tenants in there. And then I decided that I should sell this thing. And I sold it. I sold it at a profit. And so that was a risk that I took. It was a $250,000 risk. I mean, at the time, there's no way that I could pay the mortgage note on $250,000 on my salary, at the job. And so, yes, I understand what you're talking about, and yes, you can do it that way. But I don't believe that if a bank were involved financing the whole thing, that a young farmer could go to the bank today and say, you know what, I think I'm going to try farming. My granddaddy was a farmer. Yeah. My granddaddy was a farmer. My daddy's a farmer. I've been at the kitchen table with him, and I've been helping around. I don't know that much about it, but, I just got out of high school, and I want to be a farmer, and I'm going to need a tractor and a baler and a mower and a hay rake, and I want to put up a barn. I can put up some fencing, and I found this 80 acres. Right.
You
Right.
absolutely could not do that. So the farm that I had in Geraldton, the thing is, it was not the flashiest farm on the block. It had been abandoned for a while. The house was kind of run down, and I approached the real estate agent in Geraldton, and I said, listen, I wanted to know if there were any farms that you had that you've been having trouble moving along. Maybe you're a bit run down, maybe you've sort of fallen off the books, and that is that they've still got them on the market, but it's not worth their while putting any more advertising into them. That's what falling off the books means. I don't know if it means the same. I don't know if they have something similar in the way of real estate where you are. But there's some properties that just people just don't want to buy. And he said, yes, actually there is one. And I saw it, and I thought to myself, this place would be absolutely perfect. And you know something? We spent 4 years there. I never missed a rent payment in the 4 years that I was there. We put fences up. We put irrigation lines and horse troughs in. We put a yard for the dogs. We fixed the house up somewhat, installed wood-fired stoves and such like. And we bought it for $165,000, and I think we sold it for $700,000.
Hold that thought.
4 years
We'll be right
after.
back. Yeah, Guineith Isaacs is with us, and Kyle's joining us. Kyle in Montana, welcome.
Hey, good morning, Vince and Guineith. How are you guys?
Hello, how are you?
Doing well. You know, I had a couple of thoughts, Vince. One, I had a friend of mine, acquaintance more than a close friend, but anyway, he was a farmer, and he was also a pharmacist. And he told me one time his dad had been a farmer his whole entire life. I mean, he grew up on this ranch in eastern Montana, and they had a pretty good deal going, but his dad's, I don't know, kind of got dementia or something, we think, at the end of it, and sold the farm right out from underneath him. And he wanted to try to go back into farming. And so he started doing a bunch of research on it. And he said, because he did end up with a couple of tractors and a few things out of this that he actually had to buy off of his dad, which is a real sad situation as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, he figured out that if you paid more, if you had the tractors and the implements to be able to run a farm, he figured that raising cattle, you could not pay, and this is about maybe, 10 years ago, he said you could not pay more than $400 an acre for ground and make it. That would
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Now, Kyle, let me see if I've got this right. You said if you have the tractors, right? If you have the equipment, and if you had to buy the land, you could not spend more than $400. So that means you've got everything you need except the land, right?
Yep, and the cattle. I mean, he wanted to raise cattle, and he said, I could still buy the cattle because he was a pharmacist. I mean, he made good money. You know, he said I can afford to buy the cattle, but he said I figured that at $400 an acre, that would be the most I could pay for the ground in order to make it work.
That sounds about right. Because if you had to buy the land and the equipment, you could not make it work. So let me give you some numbers. There's an article. It's called farmfutures.com. It goes on to say, and this was from 2013, so it's several years old. It says the trend of shrinking numbers of young farmers hasn't changed despite all the government's efforts to help beginning farmers get established. According to the USDA's latest report on beginning farmers and ranchers, the share of principal operators with less than 10 years of experience fell to 22% in 2011, down from 26% in 2007 and 38% from 1982. But of all the beginning farmers and ranchers defined as principal operators with less than 10 years of experience, only 14% were under 35 years old. The average age was for 49, half of being 35 to 49 years old. The remaining 37% of beginning farmers were 50 or older. The national average of all farmers and ranchers, meanwhile, was 60. Now, this was an article written in 2013. So farmers are getting older, and young farmers, those who are starting out, are becoming fewer and fewer. And it's darn near impossible, which is what we're talking about. It goes on to say that it isn't a huge surprise to anyone in agriculture, considering the massive startup costs involved with farming and ranching. With extraordinary machinery costs, a limited number of acres that a beginning farmer can spread those costs across to gain the efficiencies of scale that established farmers enjoy, the economic reward of coming back to farming is not enticing. The average farm income of a beginning farm household in 2011 was $1,902. That's less than $2,000 average farm income of a beginning farm household in 2011, compared with $18,119 for established farms. So they're saying an established farm would be able to bring in $18,000. A beginning farm,
not much.
$1,900. Yeah, and that's what I've been trying to say. So for those who think that, hey, I just get some land and get some cows, and this will really be easy, and those cows will make cows, and everything's going to work out. No, it really doesn't. It's really, really difficult. And unless you come into farming with some money, or inherit the farm and or inherit the equipment, it's going to be very difficult. Does that kind of tie with what you were saying, Kyle? Do those numbers seem reasonable to you? Because they are to me.
Oh, yeah, I think so, too. But let me put a kind of a positive spin on this. In our neck of the woods, there's a great big ski resort. It's called Big Mountain. It's quite a ways away from me, but still, it's Big Mountain, and a bunch of yuppies and, rich, out-of-state people come up there in the summer and the winter, especially, to go snowboard and ski and all that stuff. And a lot of the young people, though, young couples, actually, I've noticed, I shouldn't say a lot, but there's a few. I would say I know of about maybe, 20 or 30 couples, that I've just generally met. You go to these organic things at the college they put on here, and there's hundreds of people there doing stuff. But those, I would say, I've seen and talked to 20 to 30 couples. But one in particular kind of stood out to me, and they live up in the Columbia Falls area, it's called. It's an area where there's a little town. And anyway, they bought 5 acres, and they took one whole acre of this and put in a couple of greenhouses. It's pretty fertile ground out in there, and so they started growing gardens and microgreens and stuff that, yuppies and stuff, they're real health conscious, you know what I mean? And it's kind of strange. But anyway, and then they started raising a few goats, and they have some chickens and things like that. And believe it or not, it took them about 3 years, but selling, he's doing mushrooms, and, he's enterprising, hard-working young guy, and so is his wife. They raise and sell garlic and tomatoes and all this stuff at farmers markets. And he said he grossed, not net now, this is after 3 years of doing this, but he grossed almost $60,000 off of one solid acre of this stuff. But he has restaurants and different things that he sells to. He's very enterprising. You can do it. It just takes somebody that's got their head in the game, and I would guess he's not more than 27-ish, I would say, and his wife is younger than him. But you got to have your head in the game and be, willing to work at it. But, that's not a half bad return after 3 years of working on something to do it. So it can be done. Young couples can get in there and do it. They have articles and stuff in Mother Earth News that talk about, how to take quarter-acre, half-acre gardens and stuff. Usually they're not this far north, but, You can. It's a matter of perspective, and you and I both are the same mindset. If it can't be done, we'll do it, and if it's impossible, it'll take us a little longer. And so,
that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
If young people have that same drive, they can do it.
You're absolutely right, Kyle. And that's the way we look at things here. Just because it hasn't been done before doesn't mean we can't do it. Just because it's hard doesn't mean we can't do it. And just because it's expensive doesn't mean we can't figure out a way of chopping those costs to something that's manageable and still do it. Yes, you're absolutely right. You're right. Yeah. I know you're a hardworking guy, and I know your wife Sharon is as well. And you have figured out how to stretch a dollar to its maximum, and that's what we do. That's what those of us who are farmers have to do. It's not, every once in a while I see, and it's a great while, I see a farmer with a brand new tractor and a brand new baler. I'm looking at $100,000, and I'm thinking, does he know something I don't know, or has he just lost his mind?
or has he just maxed out his credit limit?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know a guy who bought a tractor, a brand new, very expensive tractor, but it was all financed. All of it was financed, and I'm not willing to do that. What I am willing to do is find, keep digging until I find, a really good value. The last time I bought a tractor was probably a 1980s model tractor, 100 horsepower, and it was $5,500, $5,500. Less than what someone might pay for a used automobile.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something that I'm using to earn a living with. And does it leak? Yeah, it has a couple drips here and there. Am I going to fix them? I don't think so. But mechanically it runs really well. It does everything I need to do. It can pull a 15-foot batwing mower. It can pull a baler. It can pull a 9-foot hay mower. It works great. Would I spend $60,000 to replace it? I don't think so. So, farming is a lifestyle where you have to know a little bit about a lot of things. And actually, if you know a little bit more than a little bit about a lot of things, you'll be better off. But you have to know how to weld. You have to know a little bit about electricity, about hydraulics, mechanics, machinery, biology, chemistry, finance, economics, safety. You have to know a little bit, at least, about a lot of subjects because you're in business for yourself. That's what farming is. You have to know about climate, the weather, how to negotiate. There are a lot of things you have to know about. Any comments, Kyle?
I've got quite a few comments. I'll hold through the break, but it's all right.
Yeah. Gwyneth, I'd love to hear your comments as well. We'll be right back.
Yep. No,
Gwyneth Isaacs is with us.
Yep.
USA Prepares Instructor live in Australia. Kyle's with us. He's live in Montana. He's a USA Prepares Instructor. And I'm here in Missouri. We'll be right back. Kyle, I'd love to hear your comments about some of the things I've said about farming. And Gwyneth, I'd love to hear yours as well. Kyle, let's hear yours.
Well, I just wanted to point out something, this covers a lot of different areas. You remember when Paul Newman started coming out with salsa, right?
Yes,
okay,
sure.
So
spaghetti sauce, salad dressings.
Yeah, salad dressings, that kind of stuff. There's millions of them things. The stores are full of them. But he just came out and started, Paul Newman's own, all right? It doesn't matter if you're kind of duplicating what somebody else done, because there's always more and more people that are eating, So it's like a matter of marketing. Like you said, you got to know a little bit about everything. I've got a son-in-law that, he can make Abe Lincoln scream But he's just a penny pincher that you can't believe, and I love it because he's started with some cows. He's just slowly paying cash as he goes. He just bought him an old Alice Chalmers tractor with a front end loader on it, and found a screaming deal on this thing. An old farmer that was retiring, and did some work to it. I helped him fix some of the hydraulics on it and a few things like that. Just a screaming deal. Had brand new tires already on it. And, I think he paid almost enough just practically to just what it would have cost him to buy the tires. But, anyway, you know what I mean? You just have to be, you gotta have a can-do attitude. You gotta know a little bit about a lot of stuff, or know somebody that does know quite a bit about everything, that's willing to help you. And, work. It takes just the attitude is the whole key to everything. Like Rick Miller says, attitude is the key to anything. If you say in your mind, or the thought even crosses your mind that I can't get this done, I'm not going to make this, just can't be done, you're done. You're finished. You might as well quit. But if it's in your heart and your mind and your drive to say, if it can't be done, I'm going to do it. And if it's impossible, it's going to take me a little longer, then you'll get it. You will make it.
Mm-hmm. Kyle, when I was in school, there were a number of fraternities that I could have pledged and maybe become a member of one of them. I did become a member of one, but there was one fraternity in particular that I was not interested in becoming a member of. And that's coulda, shoulda, woulda. There are plenty of people that are members of the coulda, shoulda, woulda fraternity or sorority that say things like, I could have done that. I would have done that.
You've got to go out and you've got to do it.
That's right. That's exactly right. So that's a fraternity or sorority that I don't think anybody in our broadcast classroom is interested in becoming a member of, and that's coulda, shoulda, woulda. Yeah, Guineith, your thoughts about some of the things that we're talking about?
The sort of farming that I do here is called permaculture farming, okay? It actually, for one thing, it actually doesn't require a tractor. It requires good attitude, and it's all about planning. It's all about getting the different, they're called elements, the different parts of your farm to work in together with one another. And the parts of your farm that you are likely to use every single day, like, for instance, your vegetable patch, is put quite close to the house. And the parts of the farm that are used less often, like, for instance, if you had a part of your farm that you were growing timber on, you might only visit that part of the farm once every few years, maybe, or maybe once a year or once every few months. You put that at a further corner of the farm. Mm-hmm. And permaculture has a great advantage in that it doesn't take that much money to set up comparatively. You don't have to have a lot of equipment. You just have to have a can-do attitude, and you have to have the brains to be able to make all the parts of the farm work together.
Yeah, and something that I remember from my childhood, the word stick-to-itiveness. Now, stick to it.
That's right.
Kyle, thank you so much for being with us. Yeah, Guineith, thank you so much for being with us.